And they said, well, maybe the consumer doesn't want it because you're the only one.
Yeah.
And I said, no, 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 no. They're going to want it. Believe me, they're going to want it. And the buyer said, we'll just wait. We'll wait and figure that out. So when you hear that message,
Yeah.
you've got to figure out, here I've invested time and money,
I know.
but I don't have a customer that gets what the heck I'm talking about.
Yep.
And so how do I find that consumer?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Creating consumer products that don't have a pre-existing category is much harder to sell and commercialize than you would think. You have to figure out how to go through procurement, who will probably not be very receptive to your product as they might get beat up by their management. You may also not have enough funding for advertising campaigns to create the kind of buzz a new product requires. So what can you do? You need to think deeper. You have to find non-traditional ways to find your customers and convert them into champions to create a completely new market that your buyers start finding you as opposed to you finding them. In today's episode, our guest, Kara Goldin, shares her insights into how to develop non-traditional marketing channels for your new products. She also shares how she solved her initial product and supply chain challenges without any experience in the manufacturing or food and beverage industry. Finally, she shares how she prioritized with limited funding as she grew her company through inflection points, and at which point she had the confidence that this was the right product category that could scale. Let me introduce Kara to you. Kara Goldin is the founder and CEO of Hint Incorporation, best known for its award-winning Hint water, the leading unsweetened flavored water. She has received numerous accolades, including being named EY Entrepreneur of the Year 2017 Northern California and one of the InStyle's 2019 Badass 50. Previously, Kara was VP of Shopping Partnerships at America Online. She hosts the podcast The Kara Goldin Show. Her first book, Undaunted: Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, was released October 2020 and is now a Wall Street Journal and Amazon bestseller. Kara lives in the Bay Area with her family. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Kara, welcome to the show.
Hello, great to be here.
And we have been waiting this moment for a long time. I think we have been talking for what now? 3-4 months. We always wanted to have you
My gosh.
your growth story is fascinating, and obviously our podcast is about growth. So without your story, it's not going to be done. Kara, just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus?
Sure. So my name is Kara Goldin, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Hint. We started out actually as a water company, as a still water company. I created the original product that I have here, the blackberry water, in order to get myself to enjoy water. So it was a challenge for me. I was drinking diet soda, as I like to say, like it was going out of style.
Yeah.
And that's when one day I woke up and I said, I don't feel that well. I had stomach issues, some other health concerns. I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of many years. And I just decided to just test this idea. What if I gave up this one thing that was I didn't understand that I was exactly what I was putting into my body. And I was surprised to see that after 2.5 weeks, I lost over 20 pounds. My skin cleared up and my stomach felt better. I just overall felt better. But I think for me, what it really called attention to was here I was a smart person who knew a lot about direct to consumer, I had run prior to launching Hint, I was in tech. I had run the direct to consumer business for America Online. Prior to that, I was in a late stage startup called CNN and worked at Time Magazine prior to that. So had incredible experience and a great resume, but I had been fooled by this word diet and what I was stocking my kitchen with and putting in my body. And so that was when my curiosity really kicked into gear. And I thought, gosh, if this really did this to me, maybe it's doing it to a lot of other people too.
Yeah.
Maybe there are a lot of people out there that aren't really realizing it just like I didn't. And maybe I could start this water company by putting a little fruit in water.
Yeah.
And that could help people get healthy. And so that was sort of, I never called myself an entrepreneur, or I didn't say, now that I've had lots of experience working for entrepreneurs, maybe I'm going to go start my own thing or take on big sugar or big soda, some of the things that I'm known for today. But for me, it was really around this puzzle that I felt like I had accidentally solved.
Yeah.
And I thought that if I could launch this product, that I could help a lot of people that were fooled as well.
Okay, amazing story there. So obviously, mixing fruit and water is easy, but creating a business around that is far more difficult. So we are going to dig into all of that. How to set up the distribution channel, how you figured out the manufacturing process, because I don't know whether you had the manufacturing background or not. So it's going to be so fascinating. Before that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be, Hera, your perspective on business growth. What does growth mean to you?
Growth to me means growing your customer base the right way. And I feel like where entrepreneurs kind of get messed up a little bit is they get into this habit. I'll pick on Facebook, for example. You'll go and buy ads on Facebook and you might get some great growth out of it. But are those people ultimately staying? Are they sticking with you? Or if you have consumers that are always buying on BOGO, where buy one, get one free, or some sort of discounting, what is that consumer saying to you about the value of your product? Are they only going to buy it on deal?
Yeah.
And so you just have to be really, it's not that you can't do those type of things, but you have to go back to having some sort of yin and yang, I guess, around it, and making sure that you're still maintaining those customers. So as we've thought about growing Hint Space, we're not only a direct to consumer company. Actually, people are very surprised to hear that close to 50% of our overall sales are direct to consumer. About 40% are through our website at drinkhint.com, and about 10% is through Amazon and to some smaller scale other direct to consumer platforms that are out there that we sell through. But we also sell in Costco and Target, only in the US currently, as well as in places like Google and Facebook, and stocking those kitchens and those offices. So for us, I think it really just boils down to getting the right growth, but also looking at this customer and really being fair to the value of the brand. Because if you are growing your business in a way where, of course, there's some anomalies on this, but where you're never, ever going to be making any money, you're just getting top line growth, then ultimately you're not going to stay in business. So, and again, maybe there's a few tech guys out there that will say, no, it's great. Just keep getting top line growth and everything's going to be fine. But I think in particular in today's day and age, you don't have to just shut off that funnel entirely, but I think you have to be a little bit more careful to get a little closer to the center.
I completely agree. And obviously, especially when we talk about the tech community, they get really excited about marketing, about growth. They get really excited about the exits, but if any savvy business guy is going to be there, they are going to be worried about all aspects of business. It's not going to be just one aspect of the business. So here, when I look at your journey, obviously, so you have tons and tons of background in marketing. I don't know if you started as GTC to begin with as a company. I don't know if the strategy remains same as you grew over the period of time. But my question to you is going to be, you had a lot of background in tech, a lot of background in marketing, but figuring out the manufacturing process for a food and beverage brand is a different ball game altogether, even if the product is going to be as simple as water. It's a different beast out there in terms of figuring out the manufacturing process. And there are going to be challenges, especially in the food and beverage market, because you have to comply with a lot of regulations. You have to worry about the recall management. And when you are a small company, obviously, I don't know how much of that you could figure out from the beginning days, but as you grew, I'm pretty sure your challenges grew. So do you want to take us back in time? How did you figure the manufacturing out?
It's a good question. There's so many questions in your question that
Sorry.
So no. So first of all, as I mentioned, I decided if I could actually develop a product and get it to the market, I could help a lot of people. I started with this mission. Even before people were talking about mission-based companies. I mean, that for me was sort of the driving force more than anything else. But as I got it on the shelf at Whole Foods, my local market in San Francisco, I started to realize that I really had no idea what I was doing, right? That I had been in tech, I had been in media, I had never dealt with a physical product. Which is really kind of a key thing for entrepreneurs, that dealing with a physical product is just way different. I mean, you're shipping things, there's supply chain issues, there's manufacturing issues, all of those things. And so that was really the key thing. We got it on the shelf at Whole Foods in San Francisco. I felt like, okay, I'm off to the races now. I've gotten it in there. Little did I know, just as an example, that there were 10 regions of Whole Foods that I had to get it into. There's not, you don't get it into San Francisco and then it sort of, miraculously gets to all of these different locations. And with each location, you've got to ship things there. You've got to add that cost in. Here, you're going into, one location, a local distribution point where you don't have as high a shipping going in. You're not, your pallets that you're shipping in aren't as expensive, but once you're shipping across the US, you're going to have trucking expenses, all of those issues. And so there were so many things that I didn't know. And frankly, I kept thinking, well, I've got to go hire people with lots of experience, right, in the food and beverage industry, and they're going to be able to tell me exactly what I should do next. The challenge with that is that unless you hire people who have been at the stage that I was at, that early stage where, you're forced to roll up your sleeves. If you hire somebody from Pepsi, for example, they don't really know how to do that early stage stuff because they've got a network of trucks that just do it. They're not going and finding logistics people that are driving across the country and negotiating rates. All of those kind of things were things that we really, were faced with in the early days. And in addition to that, we were getting a lot of heat from Whole Foods to actually develop a product that had a higher shelf life on the product. So when I first got the product on the shelf, we maybe had a 1-month shelf life. To be inside of Whole Foods, unless you are a perishable product, you have to have at least 6 months. And well, I knew that I was kind of living on borrowed time to some extent, or before getting kicked out of there. And certainly before I was able to go sort of nationwide with the product. And something that I really highlight in my book as well around how there were so many moments there where I was trying to figure out, we went to aseptic bottling. We quickly found out that we could not just do a cold fill process, which is essentially what we were doing in the beginning. And ultimately, my spec for the product was not only fruit and water and no sweeteners, but also no preservatives. And so no one had actually done what I had done in the industry. So people were doing juice product and they were heating the juice products in order to pasteurize it. And that is where I ultimately ended up getting the idea for our product, because we don't use juice, we use essences of the fruit, which is different and probably a little more technical than most people who are watching this may find. But it was actually looking outside of the traditional industry, looking outside of the lanes that people would normally look in for answers. And it's frankly something that I share with entrepreneurs a lot. It's that if you're just living in your community, if you're just living in your own zone, that's not where you necessarily are going to find your answers. And so I tend to spend time actually outside of my zone when I'm trying to find answers to my questions. I really look at the task and try and figure out, okay, they may not be exactly the same. They have to ship something heavy across the country. Maybe I can go spend time with them and ask them how they do things and see if I can get some clues and some answers. So ultimately, we figured out how to produce this product by heating the product. And as I mentioned before, there were some mistakes, some failures along the way. One of the failures was this aseptic bottling that everybody in the industry said it's a very new technology. It's very cool. A lot of people are using it, but it was expensive. And so there was a huge trade-off. Do we go and work on something that is this new technology that is somewhat limiting because there weren't as many facilities across the country that would do it? It would also add on to our shipping. There was nobody in the Bay Area where we were initially just starting out to be able to do it. So we really had to look at kind of that. And I would say, you mentioned like the first 5 years. I mean, that was really in the first year that we were still trying to figure out how do we produce this product? What if we want to scale and actually be bigger? How do we do it in a way where it's going to be acceptable to the consumer? Because we weren't going to take all the costs in. We were going to have to pass it on to the consumer at some point in order to make a business out of this. And how much were people really going to pay for a bottle of water? And this was before direct to consumer. So we started out as a traditional beverage company. How are beverages sold? They're sold in grocery stores. And it wasn't until about year 2 when I was frankly wondering whether or not I was going to be able to make this thing work. The other thing that I should mention is that I realized not only that I was launching a new product and also launching a new company, but very quickly after trying to get my product into some other stores in the Bay Area and also in New York City, that there was no category for unsweetened flavored water. And so I share this because, let's say, for example, no matter what industry you're in, you've got this great idea. No one's got this idea. You don't want to share it with anybody because it's so good that you don't want anyone else to rip you off or go and develop this product. The problem is if you have to find a buyer in order to put your product on the shelf, or even a consumer to get your product, it's not just about advertising. It's actually about testing and getting the consumer to have engagement with your product. And so unsweetened flavored water, when I went in to the grocery stores, it was fairly easy to go into Whole Foods and get them to understand it. But then beyond that, when I went into the traditional grocery stores, they said, "So is this like vitamin water?" And I said, "No, no, no, no. Vitamin water has sweeteners in it. Our
Yeah.
product doesn't have any sweeteners in it." And they would say, "Well, what's it sweetened with?" I'm like, "Nothing. There's no sweeteners in it." And they said, "But it's not water." And I said, "Well, it is water, but it has fruit in it." And they said, "But so it can't go in the water category. It can't go into the enhanced set where everything is sweetened, can't go into soda.
Yeah.
So where can it go?" And I said, "It's a new category. It's something that's brand new. We're the only ones doing it." And they said, "Well, maybe the consumer doesn't want it because you're the only one."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, no, 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 no. They're gonna want it. Believe me, they're gonna want it." And the buyer said, "We'll just wait. We'll wait and figure that out." So when you hear that message,
Yeah.
you've got to figure out, here I've invested time and money,
I know.
but I don't have a customer that gets what the heck I'm talking about.
Yep.
And so how do I find that consumer? And what was so interesting that we realized pretty early on, actually, in that first year of business, was we had put on our bottles an email and a telephone number. And we had consumers writing into us, sharing how excited they were about this product. And the two categories, actually three categories of people that we looked at, and from a data standpoint of that we were hearing back from, were telling us that we were helping them deal with three different types of health issues.
Huh.
One was drinking more water.
Yeah.
Thanking us for drinking more water. The second was this disease that I had never heard of called type 2 diabetes. So 16 years ago, it was about 1 to 2% of the US population. And different than type 1 diabetes, people weren't born with it.
Yeah.
They had developed it over time, and they figured, many people were sharing with me that they felt that these diet sweeteners were still creating some sort of insulin spike inside of their body. And so it was those conversations that I was having with consumers, coupled with another one, which was cancer. The number of people who were sharing with me that they were excited to find a water that tasted better than plain water because they were going through chemotherapy, and the metallic taste they were getting in their mouth from plain water was enhanced. Yet this product that I had developed was actually helping mask that taste. So that was the moment when I really saw this healthy halo that I had in front of me, which of course, as a founder, really excited me, because I felt like, okay, I am doing what I was setting out to do, to really help people enjoy water and get healthy. But how do I reach those people? And we didn't have any money to go and advertise, put billboards up all over the place.
Yeah.
But even if we had the money to do that, I thought, is that really going to create engagement? Is that going to create trial with the consumer? And instead, what I did was I used the conversations that I was having with these customers, and I went back to them and asked them a little bit more about what they did.
Yeah.
And tried to determine, for example, in the case of type 2 diabetes, I would reach back out and I'd say, "I'm very, very excited that you reached out to us. Is this a community that you feel is growing? I mean, do you have other people that maybe I could talk to?" And I would hear about these events that were going on. And so I would go to those events. And it was nothing to go to these events, I would stand out there and I would hand out water. I would grab a couple of friends and I would hand out water. I'd say, this is an unsweetened flavored water. It's great for people with type 2 diabetes. Also, people who don't have type 2 diabetes that just want to enjoy water.
Yeah.
And it was that strategy of getting the product out there, getting that trial, which allowed us to really gain this customer and grow the category where they would go into stores and they would recommend us. And the power of a customer going to a store and saying, hi, I'd really like you to order this product. This is a great product, versus me, who's just trying to sell my product in and say, you should create this new category. After a while, and it took a little while, it took about a year for us to really get some of those phone calls coming into us. But I think that if you are not thinking about a way to grow your customer, grow your community, grow your category on your own, then it's going to be difficult for you to ultimately grow a business.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I mean, obviously, if you are talking about simply standing right outside the store and trying to sell your product, then it's going to be a different strategy. But in your case, what you really did is you basically created the engagement with the product and the customer, and you had the data to be able to create the right community as opposed to just hanging out in any random community. And that actually gave you a lot of boost overall in terms of your market penetration, also the engagement with the product. So obviously you had a lot of different problems to solve here. You had the manufacturing problem, you had the supply chain problem, you had problems related to your consumers as well. So in terms of the priority, when you were in the initial years, and I'm pretty sure you were also very limited in terms of your funding too. So how did you prioritize? What did you outsource? Did you outsource, let's say, the entire manufacturing in the beginning, or was that completely in-house? So can you talk about a little bit about, what was your focus in terms of your organization versus what you were utilizing outside help?
Yeah, so in the food and beverage industry, most people actually use co-packers. They don't actually, that's a very different business. And it's a business, frankly, that is kind of like automobiles. The value of, plant and the manufacturing goes down significantly the day it turns on. And so we were quick studies on that, understanding that there were so many possibilities, not so many that were able to do what we wanted them to do. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, but we never owned and still don't to this day. At some point, when you get to a certain scale, maybe it does make sense to do that. And depending on sort of the different financing vehicles and all that kind of stuff, but it not until much, much later would that make sense. But in terms of importance, I mean, frankly, it was all important. I like to think of it as different lanes running at the same time. And frankly, I think that that's the world of a startup. It's like, you've got to be able to kind of be a generalist and be able to look at all these different things along the way. I mean, I was delivering cases as well as selling the cases and, manufacturing. I was doing customer service. I was doing the small amount of marketing and PR that we were doing in the early days. I mean, there wasn't sort of the social element 16 years ago that maybe, there is today, but definitely I think it was a little bit of everything. And the main thing that I wanted to do, you talked about, fundraising. We self-funded the company for the first 2 years. And my husband was actually an intellectual property attorney in Silicon Valley and kind of looked at me like, what the heck is she doing? And she's running, 1 million miles a minute. We had 4 kids under the age of 6 at the time as well. And so it was pretty crazy. I had childcare and help, and but my husband was taking a break and from his role that his company had been acquired, and so he was taking a break and kind of interested in the process too. And again, he's always been very, very curious, but he was also getting concerned when he saw me writing $50,000 checks out of our personal bank account for bottles and caps and everything. He thought, wait a minute, let me understand this a little bit more. And I think I think for both of us, it kind of came down to it learning something totally new, but also taking what we had learned from tech, taking what I had learned from media and these other industries in order to grow businesses, I think was something that I say to this day that I so quickly discounted that the fact that I had no idea what I was doing. I had those days when I felt like, oh my gosh, if I, had just more experience or this or that. But then once I realized if I actually paid attention, slowed down, thought about things, just because people were telling me it can't be done, a preservative-free product using real stuff in it can't actually be done, I would ask the question, why? And in many ways, I mean, you have not been in the food and beverage industry. I would say something and you would say, why? And you can do that because you haven't been in the industry.
Yeah.
You're allowed to ask those kind of questions. And maybe you follow that up with saying, oh, I just have never been in the industry. I have no idea. There are some people who think, I'm not going to talk to this person because they're a total waste of my time. I'm not going to sit there and educate them. But other people would actually say, I have no idea. I don't know. And I thought, well, if I ever find out the answer, I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to let you know. And they said, please do, because I really have no idea exactly what the science is behind it or why it can't be. And so, again, I think coming from the tech industry where the code just continues to get upgraded, right? You've got the products continue to get upgraded along the way. You don't necessarily you live with this thinking of the answer's got to be out there, but we have to keep working towards it. And maybe I'll be the one who comes up with that, but maybe not. And I think that mindset, taking that into this industry that frankly did not have that same mindset was really, really useful.
Yeah, so very interesting. And I'm actually going to have a follow-up comment on what you just mentioned, right? So if anybody cannot explain, that means they probably don't know. So in my case as well, I mean, I'm always like, okay, you have to tell me, you have to show me, even though I'm not from Missouri, and I don't know if you know the saying or not. Even though I'm not from there, you have to really show me. Otherwise, I'm not going to believe you. So thank you so much for that. So the next question I'm going to have for you is going to be related to the confidence, right? In your journey, when you were going through, obviously, you had a lot of challenges in your journey. You had to solve a lot of manufacturing problems, quality problems, supply chain problems, consumer problems. But at what point did you really get the confidence that, no, I'm actually sitting on, let's say, $100 million business or $200 million business or $1 billion business? I don't know. I mean, whether you had this from day one, at what point did you really have the confidence? No, this is a serious business and I can build on it. What was that point like?
I think that once we actually figured out how to produce this product and get the proper shelf life, again, I felt like we were dealing with an industry that really felt like they were finished, right? That they had figured it out and all they had to do was just throw some preservatives in the product and it was all great. When I showed up, I'm like, no, I don't want that. And they'd say, well, you have to have it. And I said, do you have to have it? I mean, maybe you do, but no one can tell me why you do exactly. And so let's see if we can come up with different ways. And so ultimately we ended up coming up with a way by pasteurizing and heating product. And so as we started to look at some of these manufacturers who said, no, you can't do that, then we would back out and say, okay, but you can heat product correctly? Yes, but you can't heat water. Why? Why can't you heat water? Well, actually, you can heat water if you have this tool. And so we found one plant in particular in the early days that allowed us to test it. The only way that we were able to test it, though, was to buy some small change parts.
Yeah.
And so we invested very small amount of money in the change parts to see whether or not we could test it. Again, many people said, you're not putting these change parts on my equipment, but there's always going to be somebody, if you just keep asking, to allow you to do that. And so as we were able to do that, then we saw that we were actually able to take the cost down because we didn't have this cost of preservatives, for example, in the product. And then it was actually cheaper because we were just using heat in order to produce this product that we wanted in the first place. And that was the moment when we really started to get confidence that we could get the shelf life up. But in addition, as we were rolling it into different stores, not only in the Bay Area, but also in New York City, we saw in 2 different major markets that the consumer wanted the product. Again, we weren't doing any advertising at all for the first couple of years, zero. We were depending on the consumers that we were finding at events to actually go back into the stores and hopefully buy the product or look for the product or suggest the product. And so I think just the combination of being able to finally make the product, but also selling through the product and getting the reorders was a key thing. Something else that I think is really interesting too, you and I were talking at the beginning about thinking about what can we do? Look, I wanted to grow this product, but I felt like there were still grocery store kind of gatekeepers that weren't allowing us to come in because we weren't the category that they were accepting yet. They didn't know whether or not they should give us a chance because I was the only brand out there in the market. I didn't have competition. And so that's when I was actually talking to Google about potential job. It's interesting because while my heart said that I wanted to continue to grow this product and we hadn't gone out and seeked outside investment yet, I really was still taking phone calls from people who were asking me, potentially recruiting me for different roles. And one of them was a gentleman, Omid Kordasani, who was at Google. And he said, you should, I don't know what you're up to. You've been off work for 2 years. I'm thinking, I haven't really been off work. I've been working my tail off. But anyway, and so he said, come, have lunch. Let's talk about, this role that I'm sort of specking out. And that's when, after kind of hearing about this role a little bit more, I said, I've got to be honest with you. I've been working on this product, and I pulled a bottle of Hint out of my bag. And he said, I don't get it. A beverage company? And you've been working on a beverage company? You don't have experience. How did you decide to do this? And I told him about really how I stumbled upon it, solving my own health issues. And he said, well, good for you. It's crazy because you could get a job in tech and you could go and do a lot of different things, but I think that's terrific. You're going and you're following your heart and your curiosity and your passion. And he said, it's really interesting. We just hired chefs to actually cook for us at Google. And I don't think they have any drinks that they're offering to employees. And I said, oh, maybe they could have some Hint. Joking, but kind of serious. And he said, oh, I'll send you Charlie's phone number. And he's our, the main guy that's in charge of this. So I reached out to Charlie and I said, hey, Omid suggested I reach out to you, and, no pressure at all, but I used to be in tech. And he gave me a call and he said, oh, it's so interesting. Like, you started a beverage company, you used to be in tech. Tell me a little bit of the backstory. And he said, sure, I like Omid a lot. I'll give it a try, just so you know. I mean, we'll buy 10 cases from you, but if it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. We have to have stuff that people like. So I drop off the cases in my Grand Cherokee, and the next day he calls me and he said, "Can we get 30 more cases? Everybody loves it here." And I said, "Oh, that's terrific. Of course, I'll bring it down today." So I bring it down. And then a couple days later, he calls me and he said, "Can we get 300 cases?" And I didn't have 300 cases.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, how big are your offices? How much are you guys going to go through?" And he said, "Well, I mean, I think we're going to be going through like a truckload a month pretty quickly." And I said, "Oh gosh." So that totally changed exactly what I was doing. And Google became bigger for us than any of these stores. Here I was banging my head up against a wall trying to figure out, how do I fit into their planograms? How do I create a category? Suddenly I bring it to Google and Charlie's like, "You need to make more now because we're thirsty." And I love the fact that we're just giving people water. And so Google really launched this entirely new distribution, not just for us, but for all tech companies. I mean, you've heard about, the micro kitchens and that whole in office, not only food, but also drinks. I mean, that really started with Hint, and that started, at Google. But again, thinking outside of the box, thinking outside of how do we actually reach our goals when you're hitting a place where you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Can you actually look outside a little bit and say, what else can we do? And kind of just continue doing what you're doing. The number of entrepreneurs who reach out to me and say, "Gosh, I can't get into Costco. I can't get into Whole Foods." And I always say to them, what else can you do? Because maybe there's something else that you can be doing. And when you do those things, then what you really wanted will come back around and start calling you. And that's exactly what happened for us at Hint.
Okay, amazing. And I think your stories are so fascinating that we can probably go on for hours, but we are close to our time now. So do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners, Kara?
Yeah, I mean, I think we didn't get to the direct to consumer, but I think, that's a similar story to the Google story. And I think it's just trying to figure out ways to get to your customer. Once you understand who that customer is, and that customer, frankly, has just expanded since those days 16 years ago of going and taking those customer service calls and emails, figuring out where is that person, what are they doing, and then expanding on that. We didn't do any advertising until the last couple of years. I mean, we continued to grow very organically, but focusing and zeroing in on the data that we were seeing from this customer and trying to figure out how they were living. And so I would say that in any industry, understanding who your customer is, understanding how they're living and what they're doing, speaking to your customer. Don't separate yourself from customer service. Definitely learn who this person is, because that will help you to grow not only in the right way, but much more profitably.
I completely agree. In fact, my personal takeaway is going to be that you are always going to have ways to reach to your customers. The only thing you need to think about is how to be creative. Yes, there are going to be traditional channels. Yes, there are going to be barriers, but the more creative you are in terms of finding those customers, the more success you are going to find. On that note, Kara, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a fascinating episode.
Thank you.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Kara or Hint, head over to drinkhint.com. It's DRINKHINT.com, or order her book Undaunted through Amazon. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Darren Mitchell, who discusses the challenges and strategies of people, processes, technology, and products at each stage of his growth through inflection points. Also, the interview with Brian Burke from sellyourmac.com, who takes us through each inflection points in his company's journey and how the need for people, process, and technology changed at each step of his growth. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.